Hello, so today I thought we'd make some tissue tape. As you can see, there's a lot of different things you can do with it, a lot of different designs. I'll show you the basic idea and then you can adapt it to however you want. Most of these are using distress oxides, but you could use distress inks, you could use acrylic paint watered down a little. Basically whatever you've got, give it a go. You could try on a small area of tissue first or rice paper first and then see if it works. So the first one that I'll show you, move those out of the way, is this one. This is just distress oxides applied with a brush and then some mark making and some little marks with Sharpie pens. So if I set all the tape aside for the moment. So I've got this, which is actually rice paper, but it's very, very fine rice paper. It looks more like tissue paper, but it has got the odd little thread that you can see, so it is definitely rice paper. It has a smooth side and it has a slightly rougher side. I don't actually find that it makes much difference which side you use. So for this tissue tape, I applied my double-sided tape first and then inked up because I found it was easier. Some of the other techniques you apply the tape later, but for this one you add it first. I'm using quite a wide double-sided tape. This is actually Q-Connect double-sided tape. I've got a couple of long pieces which are just, they weren't the right length or anything, so I just attach them back on the roll, but I'll get rid of those. So as I say, it doesn't matter which bit which side you use, and I don't particularly cut, I just tear my tape. So you sort of measure it so it's long enough. Hope you can see this, to go the full length or width of your tissue. Try and get your tissue as smooth as you possibly can. And I have a little bit at both ends which overlaps. And we're basically just going to cover our piece of tissue with strips of double-sided tape. We leave the backing on. You don't need to get rid of the backing. And what I'll do is I'll probably just do 4 strips. I'll lift it up so that it's off my desk. Trying not to rip it. So you see, we can see our double-sided tape all the way across. I'll cut this bit off and just show you with a small section of the tissue, rice paper. And then we'll do the other piece with a different technique. So you can see we've got, you maybe won't be able to see, but we've got our tissue up to this line. This is double-sided tape with no rice paper on it. So what I do then, I get some just scrap paper, doesn't matter what it is, and I place it so that it is on the edge of the rice paper. So the little bit of double-sided tape which hasn't got rice paper on it is now stuck to the paper. Cut that off, and we both do that at both ends. Sometimes you have to just wriggle it about till it's on the end. This bit is very, very important. You need to do this, because if you don't, when you start to use your tape, you won't be able to get the backing off, because the tissue is so fine you won't be able to separate the backing from the tissue. If you've got this here, then you can easily get the backing off because it's attached to the paper. See, just get a little bit off, and then you can see. Doing it with my left hand. So you see, it comes off the paper and then it comes off the tissue very easily. If you didn't have this piece of paper on, it would be very, very difficult. So the next step to the basic one is I've got some distress oxides. I've got peacock feather, picked raspberry, spiced marmalade. 3 quite vibrant colours. I use brushes quite often to apply my distress oxides and my distress inks, because you can get a nice subtle application. And I'm just going to go randomly onto my rice paper. Doesn't matter if you go onto the paper at the edge, that's absolutely fine. You can build it up and put as much on as you want. So that is peacock feather. I'll change my brush and go on to spiced marmalade. And as I say, you can do this as vibrant or as subtle as you want. I quite like a subtle effect for this one. A little bit more over there. So that's that one. And then we will do picked raspberry with another brush. Now, when it's in a block like this, it looks quite not blended very well, just a little bit sort of okay. But we'll do other things onto it, and then you will see that it does, and when you split it up, it does change it up. I'll just wipe those inks off a little bit. There we are. So we've got a couple of creases in the tissue, which when you add the ink, it does highlight the creases. But I don't mind that. That adds a bit of texture. If you wanted a lot of texture like this, you could actually wrinkle up your rice paper so you got a nice lot of texture before you start. I'll do that with this piece because I'll do the other technique with a wrinkled piece. Now the next thing I do like to do is a bit of mark making but also a little bit of stamping with foam stamps. These are foam stamps which you can see I've used a lot with acrylic paint, with all sorts of different mediums, and I've actually created these myself. So it's funky foam, which is like this. I've got various colours. It doesn't matter on the colour. Whatever you colour, it matters not. You can get quite a thin one like this. You can get a thicker one. I haven't come across it locally, so I just use the thin one and it works fine. I then cut out shapes out of my funky foam. So say I've got this piece of funky foam, and what shall we do? We'll do a circle or a rough circle. You can draw on your funky foam first with a biro or anything like that. So we've got to do a couple of circles. Do a third one, I think, out of this little bit. Three circles. Bit of that. And then I mount mine onto really whatever I've got about. Most of these are onto a couple of layers of corrugated cardboard. One layer of corrugated cardboard. Yeah, that's one layer. That's one layer, but then I've stuck a little bit of corrugated cardboard to make a handle, so it's easier for stamping. This is on corrugated cardboard, but then I've got one of the spacers out of a canvas on the back, so it gives me a bit more of a handle to press with. Just use what you've got around. This design here is actually die cut. You can die cut the thinner foam with normal dies, and so you can get some quite nice fancy stamps. This isn't corrugated cardboard, it's just some packaging really out of something, and I've glued 4 layers together to make something substantial. And then I'll just use some strong PVA and just glue my circles, hopefully these will fit, onto my backing. Just about fit the last one on. Yeah. Just move it over a little bit. That's the thing with the PVA, you get a little bit of wiggle room. So that is ready to stamp with. Let's move it just over a little bit. I would normally let that dry completely. What you can also do is you can impress marks into your foam so that it gives added texture. Let's see, something like a top of a pen. And you can just press it in. Remember to go off the edges a little bit sometimes as well, and that may give a little bit of texture. So these are all, as I say, homemade stamps. We'll use this one because we've just created it, but we'll use the stars as well. So I'll pop these away. we'll bring our, I think I'll put it that way around, our rice paper back in, and then we'll use our stamps just to add some interest. There we are, that's a nice lot of ink onto here. So we've inked it up with Distress Oxide, and then we just press it onto our rice paper, tissued paper, whatever. So you can see we've got the circles, but we've also got the texture element because we've pressed a mark making top into it. I'm going with the pink onto areas of a different colour, so the separate colour shows through underneath. Let's see, we'll go up a couple up here. And this is quite random. And I don't mind, you see that isn't a perfect stamp. I don't mind that. It is random. I like random. And I like the faded out look as well. So we'll go here again. There we are. I think that's enough of the circles, so we'll pop that away. And we'll prop our oxide away. I think I'll do, yeah, I think I'll do the peacock feather next. Now this time I think I will just do some mark making. So you remember our pen top that we had? Get a reasonable amount of ink on. There we are, and we can make marks just randomly again. And don't forget to overlap some of the joins because that gives a really nice effect. There we are. And then we might add one more element. We'll have some orange again. And we might do some stars, I think, this time. Or I might have a single star. Yeah. This particular stamp is getting very, very worn because it's had an awful lot of use. Might have to be retired. Been using it for about 2 years now. And you can overlap slightly your other stamps that you've done. There we are. That looks rather nice. And I'm trying to put these into areas that don't have much interest already. You can always check how much ink you've got on your stamp by just turning it over. And you don't always have to ink the entire stamp up. You can just do part and just go partly in. Let's get rid of that. Just a couple more. I say, you don't have to. There we are. I think that will about do it. I might have one more up there. That's it. I always try and remember to wipe my foam stamps with a baby wipe or something, so that when I've been using distress inks, if I don't wipe them and put them onto a different colour, because it's a wet medium, it will reactivate it even if it's dry, and then you might get strange colours. Now, I've got the odd little bit that technically has got a mistake. This is the line of the edge of the cardboard. I'm not precious about it. So what I'm going to do, I've got a blue, a pink and a purple Sharpie. Now, because the rice paper or tissue is quite absorbent, what you can do is you can just go in and press the nib of your Sharpie on, and the ink will spread. So you can add little dots of interest onto your tape as well. You can go as big and as random as you want. I tend to group mine into 3s, but you don't have to. And some will be quite subtle like this. You almost won't see them. But if you've got a little mark and you want to hide it, it's quite nice just to have little dots, and then it does cover up any little mistakes. But it adds a little bit more vibrancy and a little bit more interest to your tape. So there we are. Now what you could do, because this is all Distress Oxides, you could put embossing powder on it. Because the background is Distress Oxides, it would pick up nearly everything, and I think that would be way too much really for this. So I'll set this aside to dry, but I'll show you what you do once you've got to this stage and it is dry. So you've got, just move that up, your paper. We've got it the inked side up, and you cut through your paper so that you get to the point where your tape is joined. Now at this point you can do two things. You need to do that at both ends, and you can see where the gap in between your tissue is. So at this point you can just cut with your scissors. I use fairly big scissors for this. Up and go all the way up. What I quite like to do, and this is why it was better if it's dry, is turn it over and just start at this end, it's easier. Hold the tape and just tear. Which then gives you your tissue tape in a long strip. So I'm just holding it down with my hand and pulling the right hand strip, if you're right-handed, left if you're left-handed, towards me. So it rips along the join. As I say, it's better when it's dry because you won't then smudge your colours. And there we are. That's our tissue tape. You can then go back once that is completely dry and use white pens, gold pens, silver pens, Poscas, Pitt pens. Let's see, let me find a micron pens. Anything you want to add a little bit more interest. What I quite like to do with the little dots I've created with the Sharpies is just go around them with a gold metallic pen. It just makes them a little bit more interesting, adds a little bit of bling, and personalises it basically. You could write on here. You could do anything. You can basically make it as personal as you want to do. This is quite a vibrant strip of tape. I don't think I particularly want any black on there, but what you can do, I'll show you what you can do with a Pitt pen. You can just do some little mark making. Crosses, circles, whatever you wanted. I actually quite like crosses every so often. It depends on what you want to do. So that is our first tissue tape finished. And as you can see from that little bit, I've got 4 separate strips. I tend to, once they're all dry and completed, pop them together like that, a paper clip at one end, and roll them round so that they are all together of one type, and then store them just in a circular box. So I hope you enjoy the first type of tissue tape. Right, so we've got our tissue or rice paper with our double-sided tape on the back, as we did the last time. But this time, before I put the tape on, I scrunched up the tissue paper so that it gives wrinkles and texture to it. So you can see, well, hopefully you can see, there is lots of lines and texture in here. I've added my 2 pieces of paper at the end so that when I come to use it, it will be easier. And this time we're going to do some spritzing and inking with some distress oxides. So we might make mud a little bit. Hopefully not too much. Let's see, we'll have a bit of pink as well. So I'm using the same colours that I did before, but this time I'm just going to spritz them with a little bit of water. I'll move that out of the way to set off with. This is just a mini mister. Yeah, and then I'm just going to tap our tissue paper into our ink, and hopefully it will pick it up. Yes. Turn it round a bit more. Oops, got a little bit on the back there. And I don't mind if there's the odd little bit where there's white space, because white space actually makes things stand out quite nicely sometimes. Where my inks are getting a bit muddy because they're crossed over, I shall avoid those bits. Let's see, I have to get more over there. And you can target your bits where you want your colours. There we are. So we've got quite a lot of colour on there. Normally I would pick this up with paper, but I'll just for quickness just wipe it over. I'll give this a quick blast with my heat gun just to dry it, and then we'll spritz it again with water. There we are. I think that's about dry. And you can see the little wrinkles have picked up colour in different ways. Now that's quite vibrant, so I'm going to put some black onto there. I quite like black on vibrant colours. And I might just do it with our die cut or our stars. I think I quite like the stars actually. Yes. No, we'll do the die cut, then you can see what it's like. So this time I'm going to use Archival ink because it's waterproof. Now you've got to be careful you don't get your fingers in the ink. There we are. I think that's plenty of ink on it. There we are. And where I've got big areas of a colour block, I quite like breaking that up with the stamps. It just breaks it up a little bit, makes it less intense. And I'll go in some places just at the edges. Like that. And maybe a little bit up there. And maybe just a bit over there. So that's with our die cut handmade stamp. I'll just wash this, wipe this up. Now it does need a little bit of something else. So let's see. No, I don't think that. This might be quite nice. Now I aren't sure what brand stamp this is. It may be a Stampers Anonymous. It could be Tim Holtz. It could be anything. I've lost the packaging to it, so I do apologise for that. But as you can see, it's quite a swirly script stamp. So I'm just going to add that in places, just to break up the blocks of colour. And as you can see, I am turning it round, going different directions, overlapping the black block stamp, going just on the edges. And don't worry, you don't have to do first generation stamping all the time. If you've still got ink on your stamp, go back a second time and use it up. So that's what we're looking like with this one so far. Black off again. And then again we do the same thing again. You go in and you can see where the joins on your tape are, and you just cut up to the joins through the paper. If it's easier to do it from the back, do it from the back. Let's move my stamp out the way. And then, as we've done before, rip against the edge. There we are. And there are our lengths of tissue tape. And as you can see, once you get the tissue tape into lengths, it looks completely different to what it does in a block. And you'll notice little areas of interest that you absolutely love. If there's bits, I'm not very keen on this bit, it's a bit sort of, I don't know, just a little bit bland. You can sometimes try adding something like a little bit of metallic wax. This is a Finnabar wax, and this is the bit that I find a little bit boring. So I'm just going to add a little bit of metallic wax, and it'll pick up all the creases in the tissue paper and the texture, and just make it a little bit more interesting. And sometimes if it goes on the black, it picks that texture up as well, which is rather nice. There we are. So that gives you an idea how you can make it look a little bit different. Now, both sets of tape that we've made are made using Distress Oxides. You could use Distress ink just the same. Just be careful that you don't create mud. This is the first lot that I made. I'm just going to check and see if it's completely dry. I think it just about is. This is the second lot. So what I'll do is I'll show you what we do to seal them. I do have some Tim Holtz Distress microglaze, which you can use to seal this with a foam applicator. It is quite expensive, is the Tim Holtz microglaze. It goes a very long way, but I use this. It's Vaseline Petroleum Jelly Lip Balm, and basically it's got petroleum, the aloe vera in it, isopropylene, and basically just flavours and perfumes. So I have a theory that you could possibly also use petroleum jelly, but I use this because I like the smell of it as well. And all I do is get a little bit on my finger, go to my tissue tape, and rub it on. Make sure your fingers are clean before you start. It does intensify the colours a little bit, and you have got to make sure that it's completely dry, because if not it might smudge your colours. And I just apply a very thin layer all the way down my tissue tape. You can see there it's intensified the colour a little bit. I don't mind that, as long as you're aware. I have also got a dedicated brush that I use sometimes. This is just and I just get some onto the end of the brush, and basically work it almost off in the lid. I use that for just applying it as well. I love the smell of this stuff. So there's either options, but do make sure that you have a dedicated brush for this, because it does get into the fibres of your brush and you won't be able to use it for anything else. There we are. So they are both, or should be if I've applied it properly, sealed. So if I put that apart away, and when you feel them, they do feel quite silky smooth once you've applied the wax. They have a different feel to the tissue paper. And I will show you, hopefully you'll be able to see this, what happens if you put water on. So I've got water, and let's see if we can go here. There we are. Now hopefully you'll see that the water just sits on the top because it's sealed the surface. Normally if this wasn't sealed, those colours would move and you'd get a bleach effect where the water has been. But it does protect it. But do also be aware that some mediums, or most mediums, won't actually go onto that now, because it's been sealed with a greasy product. I did create a couple of quick cards with tape like this. So I'll just quickly show you. I'll move those out of the way. This is just a happy birthday one. This is the tissue tape in the background, and I've added a little bit of gold pen and some black micron pen, and then just stuck a peel off over the tape once I've stuck it onto the card and done a border. This one, also going to be a card front. It's just got two strips of the tape, a border and a peel off, and I've used some silver and gold to highlight some of the dark black stamping that I did with the foam stamps. So that's a different idea. You will have noticed, hopefully, the different types that I've done. There is one last one to mention, which is this. This is just the plain tissue, and I applied the tape to the back. I then used VersaFine Clair in Nocturne, and I used Tracy Evans stamp. Find it. This one, the All and Create one, Tracy Evans for All and Create, number 350. And with the VersaFine Clair, I stamped all the way along. It was obviously in a big block. There was lots and lots of tissue, and I did it randomly. First one way, another way to completely fill the sheet of tissue. I then heat embossed it just with a plain powder, which happened to be Paper Mania clear embossing powder, because that's what I had to hand, but any clear or black embossing powder would do. And I heat embossed it. Obviously tipped the powder away once it had attached to all the text and numbers and everything, and then I heated it. You will have to experiment if you're doing that as to whether your double-sided tape will take heat. Some don't, they just shrivel up. This is the Q-Connect one, and it took the heat fine, and once it was heat embossed it's absolutely fine. It doesn't affect the stickiness, and I can still take it off. But check on a small amount first. I did keep moving my heat gun around quite a lot so that I wasn't getting a intense heat to overheat the tape, but I had to have it hot enough so that it would make the embossing powder melt. So once I'd done that, I've got white tape which I can then customise to whatever colour project I want to use it on. So I've got this one, which is the same tape, but I've then applied some Distress Oxides with one of my brushes, then spritz it with a little bit of water, let it do its thing. You can see there's nice puddly inky areas. Let it dry completely, and then I have sealed it with my petroleum jelly lip balm. So that now won't move, those inks won't move on there. I did give it a little bit of a buff up just with a soft cloth, just to make sure that there wasn't any stray bits of embossing powder on there, and just to get the ink off where I'd embossed it. But that I'm really pleased with, so that's another thing to do.